Hello, it's Blue coming to you live from Duomo Cathedral. And today I'm bringing to you the official English recap and commentary for the Altered Live event in Florence, Italy, where 128 players, actually 112 because of 16 no shows, but I'm sure they were there in spirit, began their ascent in one of the first major events since the release of the first new set in the Altered TCG, Trial by Frost. Yours truly will be doing my best to give you the play by play of this event, sped up and edited for your convenience, including some stupendous graphics, English commentary in case you haven't been working on your Italian, and of course, straining my eyes to decipher the cards being played. The event itself included a total of 8 rounds of Swiss, originally planned to be only 7, a top cut consisting of the top 16 participants with the best records in the Swiss. Every game did have a 30-minute time limit enforced that you should see on the screen as we watch and talk about the games round by round, and they were also best of ones, despite the final originally being planned to be a best of three. I assumed it was because it was getting late. And now, getting into some of the good stuff, we will review the hero breakdown provided by a lovely Discord community member. And for those of you mathematically challenged, I will break it down in whole numbers for you. We have one question mark, which we can infer by process of elimination is either Atsadi, Orak, Arjun, Waru, Lindaway. My hope is that it was Atsadi, my favorite one-armed badass, but who knows. 2 Golrang, 2 Navenka, 2 Subhash, yes, I'm still calling it Subhash, 2 Traced, 2 Akesha, 4 Rin, 6 Basira, wonderful to see, 8 Sierra, looks like we have a new Axiom favorite, 14 Crowbars, that's right, we aren't calling the deck Fins anymore, ask me in the comments if you want to know why, 16 Aonis, shocker, 16 Tasia, 17 Sigismar, and the biggest change of all, we see a Bravos hero top the charts with 18 Kojo and Buddha, potentially because of the new cards and mechanics introduced in Trial by Frost. One last quick explanation before we get into our games is I will be commentating the stream games of the top 16 to the best of what I can see on the slightly blurry camera and will overlay all new Trial by Frost cards as well as any uniques played for you to see at home. Because I'm sure you all have Beyond the Gates commons and rares mostly memorized at this point. And now, without any further ado, let's get into the first day of the top cut. Now, taking a look at the bracket and starting off the first round of the top 16, aka the top cut with Kashi Puma on Basira, probably said that wrong, versus Rocco on Aonis. It took a 6-2 record through the 8 rounds of Swiss to make it to the top cut, as shown here. And some other things to note for this top 16 is we see a breakdown of heroes with 6 Aonis, taking advantage of not getting hit in the recent Trial by Frost patch, 5 Sigismar, still doing well despite the loss of Ozma, 2 Crowbars, aka Fins, nice to see the Lyra hero back in the top cut, 2 Kojo despite having the highest amount of entrants for this event, and 1 lone Basira that we will be watching play now, so let's get into it. Okay, so we are officially off script right now, watching some games and commentating a little bit. Top 16 has not quite started here, but we'll be watching the Basira versus Aonis. See the Seringer come out. I think that's how you say it. A little hard to tell, and I may miss some cards based off of the camera angle, but here we go. We do see a 3-tap of the Aonis, which I assume is some type of permanent that we couldn't see. And we also see the Bravo Split Dancer come out for the Basira getting the double advance. if I can find what that other card that may have been played was. Not a permanent. It may have just been Moth to a Flame potentially, or Conjuring. Not Conjuring Seal. It could have been Conjuring Seal just to get draw, potentially. Can't see the reserve at this moment, so I'm not quite sure. But that seems to be the most likely out of everything that I can tell from their deck list. An instant 3-tap and nothing out on the board. More than likely going to be the Conjuring Seal to draw some cards. 1 tap for the Aonis to bring out the Studious Disciple. And we do see the Blade Dancer come right back out. Second Studious Disciple for the Aonis. And that looks to be the fleeting Blade Dancer that was previously played, potentially. Looks like one of them got hit with an Off You Go, potentially. Hard to tell with the glare there, but it seems to be the case based off of what I can tell from their deck. This will result in a 1-for-1. The Seasoned Blade Dancer down to the reserve for the Basira. And 2 Studious Disciples for the Aonis player. Yeah, the reserve is kind of off the screen a little bit there for the Aonis, so I'm going to do my best to try to remember what's there and what is not. Side note, they are running on the 2-player mat, which is always fun to play on if you happen to have one yourself or if you play someone that does have the 2-player mat at your locals or at events. Always suggest it, especially with the adventure track available right there in the middle. And it's a little bit larger than just standard 2 playmats, obviously, so bit fun there. We do see it looks to be a Haven Bravos Bastion being played in the rare to get a Chiron sent to reserve based off of the resupply. This is the Bravos version, so it is allowed to be played opposed to the Axiom, which is currently suspended. 5 mana apiece, I believe. Even though we can't see the Bravos player's mana, we are on day 3 of this top 16 match. You will see the unique red coming out that will pop up on the screen for you. It is 2 from hand, 3 from reserve, 2/2/2, has seasoned. From reserve, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, you may return a card from your reserve to your hand. And when I go to the reserve from the Expedition Zone, if I have 2 or more boosts, draw a card. See the Seringer come out as fleeting, 2 boosts due to the Basira ability. It looks like the Basira player is using the dice to show the opponent how many cards are in hand. They just set their hand down and put a dice on top of it, potentially. I believe that is what we're seeing on the right side there. We do see the helping hand come out on the red in order to get those 2 boosts that we were talking about to be able to get that card draw from its ability once we see it go to the reserve. Not much else happening at the moment. Hopefully you can see the adventure track and the hero and companion tokens fairly well. It's not too bad from what I can tell. The Basira player is using a slightly gray tokens. It looks like they're potentially 3D printed. But we are seeing the new first player token from Trial by Frost that some folks may have gotten from their launch events. I tend to also use or put my tokens kind of in the reserve area, similar to the Aonis player sometimes, if I don't feel like grabbing them out of my little token box that I have on occasion, but not a bad idea, especially if you don't plan on leaving too many cards out there in the reserve. See a one tap come out from the Aonis player. I assume we're going to see a Studious Disciple. And there it is. Final play of the turn, no bother in doing bleeding. The Seringer will allow the opponent to draw, or the Basira player to draw a card, which is in fact what happens with their hand there, as we can tell. So it's nice to see as far as on our end, being able to see the hand cards placed down on the table, especially with the restricted camera view here. This will allow the Basira player to go up 2 spots on the Tumult, so doing quite well against the Aonis player, where the Aonis typically wants to just get ahead and put themselves in small step territory. No uniques coming out from the Basira player quite yet, show you. They are running some Trial by Frost cards in their deck list that we may get to see. That red comes out, so we will see its from reserve ability kick in. You may put a card from your hand to reserve. If you do, you may return a card. But it doesn't look like they actually decided to use that. And speaking of uniques, we do see the Tomo Gozen unique for the Basira player, which has just draw a card for 3 costs from both hand and reserve, 2 for 3 stats, and it can't be played if you have less than 6 mana orbs. A good card draw, especially for the Bravos deck list. We see a helping hand being used on the red. Boost it up some more. It is seasoned. Why not? As the Basira takes a moment to decide what the next play is going to be. Still has the Chiron in reserve to help initiate that Basira ability if needed. And we will see it being played from reserve. With all the boosts going onto the Chiron. Potentially trying to play around for some type of removal that would allow the Aonis to 2-0 here. And guaranteeing at least one advance and staying ahead of the Aonis player by potentially going 1 for 1. We'll take a moment to say thank you to the folks over in Italy from streaming this event. Although it's a little bit hard to tell, it at least gives me the opportunity to make this video and potentially let folks that are English speakers see some of this content if they didn't get to see it directly and aren't sure what the cards do. And we will see the 1 for 1 happen. The Basir player is just 2 advances away from taking this game in the top 16 and advancing to the top 8. Aonis is still 2 advances behind on the Tumult. Still a lot of game to go here, though, I think. That red is getting mighty big in the reserve for the Aonis player with the seasoned. Would be curious to see if the Basira decklist does have any type of sabotage or removal to get rid of that red. They do in fact have Haven bouncers, so I'll be curious to see if they'll be able to hit that. Could also just play that unique Tomo Gozen that will just let them draw regardless. Not a bad play there. Technically even a better Baba Yaga in a way. More stats, same cost. And it draws from both hand and reserve. Allowing them to have, it looks like 4 cards in their hand at this point. We are waiting for their play here. Moving into day 4. Day 5. 6 man. 2, 4, 5, 7. Yeah, day 5. And there is a new card coming from Trial by Frost in this deck list, the Occlute in rare. That you'll see up on the screen here as far as what it does. It does gain a boost from anywhere. And when I gain a boost, you may exhaust a card. So they're going to go ahead and exhaust that red, it looks like. Not allow that season card to come out and potentially just take one of the expeditions a little bit too easy. The Basira player does run some removal though, so they could allow it if they had something in their hand to deal with it. Potentially a intimidation or mana eruption. They are trying to utilize that Occlute and Basira ability to get it up to 6 water and potentially advance out of that lone water setup. But we will see the Mage Dancer come out, which is always a big card for the Aonis if we can see enough spells. And we will see the Tomo Gozen come out to the right to draw a card. The Seer player seems to be a big fan of dice as far as tracking counters. The Tomo Gozen does get the boost based off of the Haven. Still in play in that top right corner. It's kind of hard to see, but it does happen to exist. Played early on in the game. Five mana left for the Aonis player. Let's see what they can do. I'm not sure if they still have a helping hand in reserve at this point. A bit hard to tell. We will see a 1-tap though. And it is a sleight of hand. Some new cards popping up for the Aonis as well. Rare sleight of hand has cooldown. Exchange target spell in your reserve with a card from your hand. So I have to imagine we did see the helping hand or something similar. We see a mana moth created. With the moth to a flame. And that will allow some boosts on that Mage Dancer as well. We do see a beauty sleep on the Clute as well, allowing for a double advance for the Aonis, putting them even with the Basira. So I have to imagine we also got a beauty sleep hitting the Clute, even though we can't see it over there in the reserve. A lot of exhausted cards, though, over there in the reserve. Don't think either of these players are running anything that would take advantage of exhausted cards in reserve, though. Both players are cleaning up at this point, and the other is that beauty sleep. Looks like the Aonis will be holding on to the beauty sleep in that red. Coming up on day 6 here, even on the tumult, Basira took an early lead, but with that 2-0 from the Aonis, we are all even, but we do see a fairly large Clute on the board for the Basira. If it does gain a boost, it will be able to exhaust cards into the reserve, so I will be interested to see if the Basira player will decide to try to boost potentially right away to knock out some of the cards in reserve, potentially that beauty sleep. But with Aonis playing first, they do get the red out right away to avoid getting hit by an exhaust. And it looks like they will use the red's effect, which allows them to put a card from their hand into reserve to pick up a card. And it looks like they just picked up that beauty sleep. Not sure what they put down in the reserve at this point, but probably something not as affected, or they're not planning on using, that could be hit by the exhaust from the Clute. As a note, that red's ability from reserve is allowing them to put a card from hand to reserve to pick up a card from the reserve to their hand. Looks like we'll see a reserve play from the Blade Dancer. Getting 2 boosts from the Haven. Doesn't look like the effect of Basira is being applied here. I believe it should have fleeting. Looks like it was played from reserve. A little bit hard to tell because, again, the reserve is a little bit cut off. Waiting on a response from the Aonis player, I believe. That card that got put in reserve by the Aonis player, I imagine, isn't worth being hit by the exhaust to add to the Clute, to activate the Basira ability to give it a boost at this point, but we'll see. Potentially a 1-cost play here from Aonis. It's always interesting when you see players organize their mana in specific ways, almost indicating which way they're going to play. We do see something as far as generating a Moth. I believe the only thing available to them to do this is Moth to a Flame. So that was probably what was in reserve, played for 2 costs, it looks like. It is 3/2 and allows a Mana Moth to be created. We see the Tiny Djinn come out for the Basira. Helping Hand hitting the red once again, just keeping it out constantly. It's been around for a couple days at this point. No removal from the Basira player played on the red quite yet. Only 1 mana left for the Aonis, and it will get hit by some type of removal. I believe it could be some form of intimidation. I didn't see how many mana was tapped. We also mentioned that they did have a mana eruption. Either way, it could be either one of those. Based off of mana available. Not sure if the Aonis has anything else to play here that would be able to stop it. They do decide to beauty sleep. That's right, they did pick that up. They will beauty sleep the Clute. We will see the Chiron come out to go ahead and boost up that tiny gen. Will allow some mana ramp to happen, potentially after losing one of their mana from a mana eruption. Guess we'll find out soon to see if that red does played from hand based off of an intimidation, or if it was just a mana eruption coming from the Basira player. Either way, we do see an advance, getting them adjacent at this point. And since the Aonis player was on mountain, that tiny gen was a good block, in addition to those boosts stopping that mana moth from helping them advance to get adjacent as well, and potentially getting in small step territory. The Aonis player is running 2 small steps in their deck, so that would have been quite nice for them, I have to imagine. I don't know if they have it in their hand, obviously, but anytime you're playing against a Aonis player, you almost have to assume that they do. The Clute does stay out once again. The Seer will be playing first, so we may get to see a trigger on the Clute to be able to tap the Beauty Sleep or something else in reserve at this point. And by tap, I mean exhaust. This is Altered. Coming up here, probably close to the final day. Only need 1 more advance from the Basira player, 2 for the Aonis. If this is not, and the Aonis is able to stop the Basira and they're able to advance themselves, they're probably looking pretty good for a small step play. We do have 5 minutes on the clock. As I mentioned previously, all of these games are set to 30-minute time limits, similar to BGA. Not a bad idea either when you're trying to keep a timely event. Decisions being made by Basira. Can't see the mana, so I'm not quite sure what they're tapping at this point, but they're playing the bouncer to sabotage. Why do you gotta worry about exhausting when you can just sabotage? It looks like it did in fact hit the beauty sleep. It does look like the Aonis player chose not to mana this day as well. They still are running off of 7 mana. Four minutes left to play in the game. We'll be curious to see if they are able to finish this out, or at least the final day. Looking at a 2-tap from the Aonis player. And we will see the red. So it in fact was hit by an intimidation earlier, not a mana eruption. So we do have a Basira player with a little bit extra mana because of the tiny gen. And assuming that they had mana previously, we do see a Chiron come out, deciding to boost itself twice. It did come from reserve as well, so that was what was cut out. We do not see the Basira come out quite yet either, so we have to assume there is another boost coming, whether it is from that Blade Dancer that is still quite big, or something from hand. I believe there should still be one other card left for the Aonis in the reserve that could be exhausted, but it doesn't look like it is a priority in this case, or maybe it's not there. Again, a little bit cut off. We do see a Beauty Sleep hit the Occlute again. Interestingly enough, been slept a few times in a row at this point, been around longer than potentially that red that was keep on getting that helping hand. But the Basira player does only need one more advance. We do see a Chiron come out again, boosting up the bouncer. And still no Basira proc? So still no Basira proc. It makes me think that they potentially still have 3 mana left to play that Blade Dancer. Get a Basira proc and just get a big Blade Dancer out there. That's going to be pretty hard for the Aonis player to stop. They do have 4 mana left to play, it looks like. 3 mana tapped. So they could still run an Off You Go. Potentially another Beauty Sleep. And we get the GG handshake. Nothing left for the Aonis player to do. So we are officially done with the top 16, moving into the quarterfinals, aka the top 8, continuing with Kashi Puma on the Basira, now facing Raiden J on the Sigmar. There is currently 2 other Sigmar, 3 in total, in the top 8, as you can see on the bracket. Matching the Sigmar are 3 Aonis as well, and 1 Kojo left to round out the top 8, being played by Skycrier, who is typically known for their Aonis gameplay, dating all the way back to a top cut run in Altered's largest event of 1,000 players located in France. But enough of the past. Now on to day 1 of the quarterfinals. And we're back. Me talking over myself this time. We have the Basira player versus a Sigmar player at this point, running one of the OP tokens of the Sigmar. Sigmar playing first, deciding on their mana. We have Giacomo, which I believe goes by Raiden J within the setup here. Take a look at a few of their options on the deck list. From my end, before we proceed forward, once again, thanks to anyone who has been watching. Fun to get to watch these other players start out with these new decks that have some new cards from Trial by Frost setup. We do get a 1-for-1 with the Baba Yaga and a Blade Dancer getting hit by the Basira ability. So it will be keeping that season stats. Always be tracking that token from the Sigmar in the top left of that screen there. So we do know which side is which as far as hero and companion, actually. See a little bit of the mana available to the Sigmar player, not so much on the Basira side of things, and things are a little bit blurry at this moment. But we do see a new Blade Dancer come out for 1 tap. And get the Basira ability as well to go 2/2/2. And the first Basira does in fact get hit by an Ortis Spy from the Sigmar player. And it will let them be ahead on that side of the expedition, with the second blade dancer only being a 2/2/2, and it does look like we see the spy get hit by some type of removal as the colors change here on the camera. Sigmar does in fact still end up advancing. Using some removal of their own. I believe it was a tiny jail, if I am correct. Now, tiny jail would have been 2 costs, so not quite sure what they got hit with there. Potentially something else, or stats were locked. Excuse me on that. I'll have to go back later and let you know. You see a Pathfinder come out after the first play of a spy from the Sigmar player. 2 mana left for Sigmar. 1 card in hand for the Basira player, as we can tell from their dice laid down on the mat. We get a color change back again. Another Baba Yaga coming out, this time the one from reserve that was already played. Chiron coming out on the other side to boost up the Pathfinder and allow for a 1-for-1 to happen. Basira down 1 spot on the tumult at this point. Two of their blade dancers have been sabotaged by 2 spies from the Sigmar player. They are running 3 of them, however, so there should still be 1 available if they decide to run into it through their deck. So far, fairly quick play, even with me speeding up a little bit. We do see a common red come out from the Basira player, potentially trying to stack it up a little bit to utilize the seasoned. Six mana in total, so we are in fact in day 4. You have not been counting. Sigmar to play in the top 8. This is the quarterfinals of the Altered Live event in Florence, Italy. We will take a look at the bracket after each of these games, give a little bit of a breakdown between each of the other games that were not shown on stream to the best of my ability. Same that I'm trying here. Potentially a 2-tap coming from Sigmar, and we will see that tiny jail that I mentioned before. Being able to send that red to the reserve because it has no stat over 3. Tiny jail is fleeting in the common, so we'll not be able to play that again. And interestingly enough, that I didn't notice before, that Pathfinder is a rare Pathfinder, so it does have seasoned. They are running 3 rare Pathfinders. Does also have the hand effect of you may pay 2 to have me gain a boost. Don't know how often that actually comes into play, but still interesting. And it will get another boost from the Basira. Replay for the Sigmar player, playing the Spy from reserve and a Legat to the other side to get a Sabotage. because they do in fact not advance on that side. Another 1-for-1, Sigmar maintaining the lead on the Tumult. Basira yet to be untapped. I assume we'll see that here pretty soon before we start the next day. There it is. See a Foundry mechanic come out from the reserve. Must have missed that before. That may be how they advanced previously without removal instead of that Tiny Jail, because we were looking for a 1 cost card, and that seems to be the case. Put a little note over here if I was right. Another 1-for-1. Aonis is now 2 advances away from taking this game into the top 8 and advancing into the semifinals in top 4. And I said Aonis instead of Sigmar. I'm not going to note that on the screen. I just corrected myself. Don't yell at me. We see the Tiny Jin come out for the Basira player. Worked well for them last time. Should be a good spot here on the Tumult with both players in Mountain. Eventually some more boosts coming out. One of the spies held in reserve coming to the same expedition, and sure enough, we see that Chiron come out to hit the Tiny Jin. And the Basira put on the Chiron just to spread out the level a little bit. Go up on that token that is being set by Sigmar. We will also see the Legat come from reserve. And a mana eruption to hit the Legat. Wants to guarantee the advance on that expedition while not getting sabotaged. Always a good choice, especially in Bravos, where you can be limited by resources on occasion. Although this Basira player does have that Tomo Gozen that helps draw. And using those Tiny Jins to help ramp up a little bit to potentially not have to mana some turns. 3 mana left for the Sigmar player. Interesting to see what they decide to do here. Great run by the Basira player, despite being behind at this point, to make it to the top 8 after going through the Swiss. You see another Legat come out. That'll put them at 3 stats in grass, which will allow them to advance. And the mountain stats in the Tiny Jin side of things will help them advance as well. 1-for-1. Sigmar 1 advance away from taking this game. Basira only 2 advances away. So they could potentially take this with a 2-0 this next day. Either way, we're probably looking at the final day for this top 8. Probably looking at that Legat being played from reserve potentially. And that is in fact what is being played. Currently on Mountain Water. Three boosts for the Chiron. I have to imagine that is because we have two Havens in the permanent setup. I probably have missed those being played, potentially just because I can't see them. And we do see a teamwork training hitting the Chiron immediately. Yeah, you can kind of see those permanents in the very far top right corner there. So it does look like two of them have been played, and we have not been able to see the resupplies from those either. Either way, we do see a Blade Dancer come out from hand. That is the final Blade Dancer that has not been sabotaged. Either way, limited resources for the Basira at this point. And we have the Baba Yaga come out, and that's a GG. Okay, we finally see the Basira be taken out as we move on to the semifinals with Raiden J on the Sigmar in a mirror match with Dandy. And on the other side of the bracket, we have Lucinho on Aonis, maybe saying that wrong, taking on Damat 96, who is also on Sigismar. Notably, we do see both Bravos players drop out in the top 8, as we are left with the dominant heroes of Sigismar and Aonis in the top 4, with at least one player piloting the popular Ortis hero Sigismar guaranteed a spot in the finals. So let's take a look at who that might be. Down to the top 4, as I have already mentioned there, a mirror matchup. And funny enough, we do get to see the Loki token taking the place of the Ortis recruit for the Sigismar player to the right with Dandy. One fun little note that I did not mention in that last matchup, Kashi Puma on the Basira does have some past events shown on their melee profile. They seem to be a Lorcana player. Over 3 pages of Lorcana events, so it's fun seeing other players from other card games trying out Altered and doing well. But on to this top 4 semifinal event. 2 Sigismar players, one rocking the OP recruit, one rocking the Loki Nox token. We see an immediate Haven Warrior play, always a good one for 444. Only the one cost play with the Ordish Trooper from the Sigismar to the right, and it will still go 1 for 1, saving a little bit of mana and cards in hand. Immediate sabotage on that warrior. Does not want to see it played again. Ortis Spy, always a top tier card in the Ortis faction. And we will see that Legat come out. I believe that was the trooper from reserve. It was. We see the fleeting token. 2 mana left to play with for the Sigmar to the left. Raiden J, also known as Giacomo, it looks like. Probably their actual name. I also probably pronounced that horribly because I am not very good at correct pronunciations. Subhash. Another Legat comes out. And we will see a sabotage of the spy. Double advance for Dandy on the right Sigismar, single advance for Raiden J on the left. Sure, Raiden J will look to utilize those Legats to potentially keep lowering the resources of Dandy on the Sigmar to the right. They cannot be slept, similar to Waru, but if you plan out the stats correctly, you can still get that sabotage off, unless they get sabotaged themselves while they are in the reserve. I do appreciate both players for playing their mana up a little bit higher so we can see it on the screen. I believe that was a request potentially for the stream, although we cannot see their hands. We missed the Basira player showing the hand with the dice. Things are a little bit clearer as far as cards on the screen, though. A little bit blurry previously. A 5 mana play by Raiden J, so we can't see the permanents, but that would make it the single Ortis Bastion, the monolith, available. We do see a unique rune scribe coming out from Dandy. We'll put that up on the screen. That does allow Dandy to advance twice. The rune scribe, if you control a token, draw a card. So solid draw. 3 costs from hand, 2 costs from reserve, and that effect is from anywhere. So they will be able to play it here again. The boost coming out on the Ortis token for Raiden J, Giacomo on the left, due to the monolith being in play, even though we cannot see it. Oh, maybe we can in that very far bottom left there. Just the corner of it. Side note, love the sleeves from Dandy coming out here. I believe that is Soul from Dragon Shield. If my eyes are not deceiving me, I run them as well. For some of my decks, not all of them, obviously, but they look cool, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, and it's just the tint of the camera here. Either way, looking pretty good for Dandy at this point, despite the monolith being on the board. They only need 2 more advances after that previous double advance to take this game. And we will see the monolith rune scribe that I mentioned will just help you draw if you have a token out. And with Sigmar, you will pretty much always have a token out. 2 cost play coming out with the Legat will get a boost. Nothing currently in the reserve for the Sigmar player, if I am correct, but potentially getting sabotaged if the Legat does not win on that single forest terrain. And they did have a trooper in reserve. That's my bad. I forgot about that. Another 2-tap with another Legat coming out potentially for the Sigmar to the left. And it will get boosted on the opposite expedition as well. They're doing a little bit of a stat calculation here. They should have 4 mountain, I believe, for the Sigmar to the left, and 3 mountain for the Sigmar to the right. Sigmar to the left is currently winning in both expeditions, I believe. We see a 2-tap, and it does put something on his rune scribe. I'm not sure what that is. Potentially a rare tiny jail? No, it wouldn't be tiny jail. You wouldn't hit your own card. Maybe... Oh no, it's a rallying call. And we do see removal hit the rune scribe anyway. So it doesn't really matter what it was. But interesting play there. And speaking of Tiny Jail, we do see the Rune Scribe get hit by it, and it is in fact the rare Tiny Jail, so it will be exhausted in the reserve, available to play later on. And with that removal, there will be a 1-for-1, allowing Dandy on the Sigmar to the right be one away from taking this game. Dandy is running 2 Sticky Note Seals that could take care of that Monolith as well if they decide to take a turn to do that. I believe we are going into the 7-mana turn, which would mean we are in day 5. That is correct, as per usual. 2-mana play from the Sigmar to the left in Raiden J. As we see a quick flash of YouTube there. Ignore that. And it looks like we see a Frog Prince come out. Don't see that very often anymore, but it is the common version. Good amount of stats, especially with Monolith out. And we will see a rare Attorney, a popular add-on to most Sigmar decks, even in Season 1 at the end of it. Solid stats, and it allows for a draw, but it will get hit with the Team Mark training, so straight to reserve. Interestingly enough, it looks like the Sigmar to the left has decided not to mana, and there is that rallying call again to boost up the token. Nothing but Sticky Note Seals left, and it is a quick game with Dandy on the Sigmar to the right taking the win. And now we are into the finals of this 128 player event in Florence, Italy, with Dandy, who we just saw be victorious in a Sigmar mirror match in the semifinals, versus Lucinio, representing none other than the bald spell boosting guy, Aonis. We've seen this matchup quite a bit in the days of Beyond the Gates in Season 1, so let's see how it turns out this time around as we get started on the first day of the finals. Yes, we are back here in the finals. As I mentioned myself, thank you, me. It is Aonis versus Sigmar, slightly blurry. Dandy rocking the Loki Nox playmat that I failed to mention in the top 4 matchup. Always a fun playmat. Wish I had it myself. I have a lot of others, just not that one. Feel free to give me yours. Dandy also going all out with the Loki Nox token in place of the traditional Ortis Recruit. And Dandy will use the Sandman to go ahead and sleep and boost up that token and get enough stats out on that expedition to go not 1-for-1, just 1 for the Aonis player. I believe it's because we saw a Moth to a Flame getting played by the Aonis, giving it 3/3/3 in stats and blocking that Sandman from getting any stats themselves. And also fun enough, since we saw a slept token from Dandy, or by Dandy from the Sandman, we will see a signed recruit of some sort. But either way, we get a Sabotage coming out on that Sandman that was in the reserve. Courtesy of the Tooth Fairy. Sorry for the pause there. And fun, we get to see a Jack Frost in rare of the Ortis being played, allowing for an exhaust of Moth to the Flame. Some Mage Dancers and even Ortis Trooper played. All nice and quick, as we have this sped up a little bit, but nothing that you will not be able to tell. It is a little bit harder to see the advancing hero and companion tokens for the Aonis player as they are running the acrylics, but to help you out a little bit, Sigmar is currently 1 up on the Aonis player. Aonis is still in the starting zone on the bottom there, if you can see the reflection of the acrylic token. We do see a trooper come out from the reserve. I have to imagine we'll probably be seeing maybe a dancer for the 1 cost being played from the reserve as well. Not quite yet though. Sigmar does have the Jack Frost they played earlier still in the reserve. Interesting that they decided not to play that yet. I assume it still is at least. But potentially just slow playing at this point to see where they can advance while being up on the Aonis player. And a unique coming out of Dandy for the Haven Warrior. It is 4 from hand, 3 from reserve, 2, 3, 3, and from hand if you have 8 or more, unless you have 8 or more mana orbs, draw 2 cards. So it's a nice little draw setup there. Had to use all the mana, but gaining plenty of resources for it. And since they have low enough mana, they can still get the effect of that draw. 1 tap from the Aonis player, so we'll see what that is. Potentially a magical training. It is, in fact, a rare magical training. They get a little bit of draw themselves. We're probably looking at another 1-for-1 here. Sigmar, Dandy to the right, is 1 up on the Tumult. Still needing 5 advances at this point, and 6 advances for Lucinio to the left, also known as Francesco, as far as their actual name. Baba Yaga played for the final bit of mana for the Aonis player to get another draw for themselves. But another 1-for-1. Lucinio on the Aonis, able to get out of that starting position on the bottom side there of the expedition. Dandy still up 1 as far as the Tumult. First play by the Aonis player. Looks like we're looking at a 3 mana tap. 6 mana for each player at this point, so we are in day 4. And we do see a Baba Yaga come out, get another card draw in there for you. I believe we also have Moth to a Flame and the other Baba Yaga still in the reserve for the Aonis. And we do have that Haven Warrior that gets to draw from hand with Dandy in the reserve. Not sure if they have another card in reserve. A little hard to tell there at the bottom right of our screen. And it looks like we may be potentially seeing a 3-tap for that Haven Warrior that has 2/3/3 in stats. Oh, it is that Jack Frost I mentioned before. And they're going to go ahead and tap the Moth to a Flame, preventing that Moth with a potential boost coming out. Oh, and it looks like they discarded the Haven Warrior because its quick effect is the next card you play this afternoon costs 1 less. Potentially, at least. I may be wrong on that. Looks like they did tap 2. And Jack Frost is a 2/2, so maybe I'm wrong, but I think that is what occurred. Maybe looking at a 1-tap here from the Aonis player. More than likely going to see a spell. And it is the magical training. Going to go ahead and boost up that Baba Yaga there in the competing expedition. I guess I can just say it's Hero Expedition. Should be fairly obvious with the Sigmar producing the token there. Orders Trooper comes out for the 1 cost. From hand, I don't believe there's anything left in reserve for the Sigmar player and Dandy at this point. We see a 2-tap come out with the Baba Yaga left in reserve. Potentially, they will not be able to advance on the companion side with just 2 stats, but they will be able to block the Trooper, but there's still 3 mana left for Dandy. I'll be curious to see if they decide to keep it over there or if they're going to try to just boost up on the hero side. So they did, in fact, not use that Haven Warrior for the cost reduction, and they play it from reserve to guarantee the advance and go 1-0 on that one, it looks like. So currently 2 up on the Tumult. I know it's a little bit hard to tell where the Aonis player is at. They are currently, with their acrylic tokens, on the single mountain terrain, as well as the single forest terrain. Not an ideal spot to be. You always want to try to be in the 2 spots if possible, but Baba Yaga is not bad for at least the forest terrain. Or nature if you're Kohlrabi. I don't know why you would want to be him, but you know, either way. Little dig there for the video. Hopefully some of you caught it. Anyway. 7 mana, day 5. We're going to see an immediate Trooper play from the reserve. Always a good card to play for 1 cost. We finally see that Moth to a Flame being played. And since we are in Aonis, it will get that boost. So a nice 3/3/3 token character out there, getting over the top of that Orders Trooper that is a 1/2/2. Lucinio on the Aonis, making it as difficult as possible to tell what's going on with the shade of those sleeves, trying to count mana, and with the acrylic tokens. But we do see a unique Spindle Harvester, one of the 3, I believe, the Aonis player has. I can't quite tell which one it is. It's either the 1/1. It looks like it is the 1/2 though, which is 2 stat in forest, 0 across the board. Elsewhere, it gains anchored from reserve. At dusk, if I have 2 or more boosts, you may return a spell from your reserve. And again, ignore the little YouTube shake there. We do see a helping hand being played to get those 2 boosts that we just mentioned, despite not having fleeting at this point. We have an attorney over to the companion side for the Sigmar player, and a Frog Prince, I believe, on the hero side. It is in fact a Frog Prince.
So it's I don't know, I cannot because you are 4. Sorry.
Potentially a 2 mana play. I'm not quite sure what it is. It might be some type of removal. Yep, we'll see a teamwork training, it looks like. Hitting that Spindle Harvester, so that ability of At Dusk will not go off to return a spell. So a lot in the reserve there for the Aonis player that's going to prevent them from returning any cards to their hand. They do have 2 mana left. Potentially looking at playing that helping hand to just boost up that mana moth and potentially win on the companion side. And they will in fact do that to give it 2 more boosts.
Okay, I move, you move, and I draw.
So Dandy will draw to the attorney, but the Aonis player will take the advance on the companion side. Dandy still is 2 up on the Tumult, only needing 2 more advances to take the game and the final of the Altered Live event. Always good to stay up on the Aonis when possible so you don't have to worry about that small step victory path for them. Quite quiet in the background compared to earlier, as you might have heard in the background as I was speaking. Everyone really focusing on this game, or we just had a bunch of people leave. Either way, a fun finals matchup between Aonis and Sigmar, specifically a Sigmar that is running quite a few Trial by Frost cards that we'll be able to take a look at some point, I'm sure. At this point, trying to decide if they are going to mana or not. We do have one of those Spindle Harvesters and a Baba Yaga in the reserve for the Aonis. They tap 2 to play that Spindle Harvester. So I was right as far as it being the 1-2 with 2 Forest, 0 Mountain, 0 Water. It gains Anchored from reserve, and at dusk, if it has 2 or more boosts, you can return a spell from the reserve to your hand. Trying to decide where they want to put it at this point. And they decide to go with the hero side, despite not having any water stat, at least initially. And it just gets immediately tiny jailed in the rare. If you're not aware of what it does, it is on the screen. It does have cooldown, so he can play it again later. Not even giving Lucinio on the Aonis an opportunity to remove the fleeting. But we do see a sabotage coming out from the Aonis player with the Tooth Fairy. It potentially hit that tiny jail, I believe, or is it hitting the attorney? It did hit the tiny jail. But the attorney comes out from the reserve. Baba Yaga from the reserve for the Aonis player. Only 1 mana left. 4 mana to play with for the Sigmar player. So we may be looking at a quick end to this match here if they are able to get a 2-0. Oh, 2 mana left for the Aonis, my bad. It's hard to tell with those sleeves. We do see a 1-tap with the Ordish Trooper. 3 mana left for the Sigmar player. 2 mana for the Aonis. They're going to have to be playing some spells, I imagine, to boost things up. And they'll go ahead and off you go that attorney to hopefully prevent a 2-0. And I imagine we'll be seeing some boosts based off of the spell play. Curious to see where it goes. And it'll go on the companion side with the Tooth Fairy. Plenty of mana left, though, for the Sigmar. And they're just going to go ahead and pass and take the 1-for-1. So 1 away for the Sigmar player, 2 away for the Aonis. And it looks like it was actually a 2-for-1. Aonis getting a double advance, potentially? No, just a single. Maybe I just had it wrong previously. But either way, Aonis 2 away. It's hard to tell with those acrylics once again, but they are 2 away. 1 away for the Sigmar player with Dandy. And they'll start off this next day with a 1-cost Trooper play. They're taking a look at that tiny jail to see what it does. I thought it had gotten sabotaged earlier from the Tooth Fairy, but maybe there was another card in reserve that I missed. Potentially a character. as we may be looking at the final day here. We need Aonis to come out with a big stop on the Sigmar player who's been ahead realistically this entire final. This event originally was planned to be a best of 3 in the finals, but I believe they are only doing a single game. We do see the Tooth Fairy come out from reserve for the Aonis player. I'm not sure how much mana is left. It is hard to tell once again with those sleeves, but we do our best. As we see the Sigmar player counting out some cards to see what they have left, we see a removal in the teamwork training, 3 tap for a Baba Yaga for the Aonis player, 5 mana left for Dandy and the Sigmar. Immediately another 2 tap. They know exactly what curve they have. We see the Tiny Jail played from reserve to send the Baba Yaga back to the reserve. Only 2 mana left for the Aonis. 3 mana left for the Sigmar player, looking dominant at this point, not allowing the Aonis player to keep anything out on the board with the amount of removal that they have available. And realistically, not many uniques being seen in this game either. We do see the Baba Yaga come out, 1 mana being tapped, and the double tap here makes me think that, oh, yep, 2 sleeps, so that is a hypothermia. And it is a GG, with Dandy taking the win. And with the handshake and the cheer of the crowd, we see the end of the Altered Live event of 128 players in Italy, with the champion Dandy taking the W with the hero, Sigmar, and Wingspan, and quite a few new Trial by Frost cards included in the deck to help them win the championship. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch me break down and commentate this event for all you English speakers. So feel free to do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button, comment what decks you're trying out this season, and hit that subscribe button, pretty please. Thank you again, and I'll see you in play on the next day.